President Trump's State of the Union address singles out Chinese theft of U.S. jobs as U.S.-China trade talks continue. That and more on this week's China News Headline. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest China news and click the notification bell so you get an alert each time we publish a new episode. This week's China News Headlines. You've been waiting for it all year. No, not the latest Star Wars movie. President Trump's State of the Union address. They hyped it up big time. What with that whole Nancy Pelosi blocking it if we don't have a government thing. Man, they know how to sell out a show. And may I just ask, have you been enjoying your government shutdown purge? I know I have. What's that, Shelley? Crime is still illegal during a government shutdown. Yes, of course, I know that. Anyway, this week we finally got this year's State of the Union address. And the State of the Union is great again, I assume. But in the hour-plus-long speech, President Trump delivered on his crowd-pleasing favorite, China.
We are now making it clear to China that after years of targeting our industries and stealing our intellectual property, the theft of American jobs and wealth has come to an end.
And the crowd goes wild. Although that's still just aspirational. The Chinese Communist Party hasn't actually stopped stealing American jobs and wealth. But that's what Trump hopes to get out of the latest round of trade negotiations. There's less than a month left for the U.S. and China to agree to a new trade deal. If that fails, President Trump will levy a 25% tariff on $200 billion worth of Chinese imports. Or I guess they'll just extend the deadline, which would be great, since if all the U.S.-China conflicts are suddenly solved, I'd go out of business. I'm not worried, though, because getting that kind of trade deal, it'll be tough.
I have great respect for President Xi, and we are now working on a new trade deal with China. But it must include real structural change to end unfair trade practices, reduce our chronic trade deficit, and protect American jobs.
All of that would mean real structural changes to the Chinese Communist Party's rule, the kind authoritarian states don't like to make. According to Bloomberg, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin will lead a delegation to Beijing next week to lay the groundwork for a meeting between Trump and Xi later this month. The last time Trump was in China, Xi Jinping pulled out all the stops, including giving Trump a rare tour of the Forbidden City. And man, Trump had an unreadable poker face. Doo-doo-doo, no plans to launch a trade war. And then he launched a trade war. We'll have more on the trade war as it develops, unless it ends in a few weeks, but it's not going to. The Chinese Communist Party has been, let's say, encouraging wealthy Chinese billionaires around the world to influence politics in foreign countries. Australia had a bad case of it, thanks to loose campaign financing laws. So loose, Chinese nationals like this guy, Huang Xiangmo, could contribute to their favorite political parties. Over the years, Huang donated millions to various Australian political parties. The problem is, he's connected to the Communist Party's United Front Work Department, an arm of the Chinese Communist Party that promotes Chinese foreign policy abroad. But last year, the Australian government changed campaign finance laws to restrict foreign donations. And just this week, Australia canceled Huang Xiangmo's permanent residency and denied his citizenship requests and effectively banned him from the country. Of course, the shady links to the Communist Party and generous political donations played no part in the decision. No, not at all. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, which first broke the story, it was for a range of reasons, including character grounds. Obviously, I mean, who wears a belt with his initial on the buckle? That's pretty tasteless. Shelley, you take that down now! Happy Lunar New Year, or as they call it in China, New Year. February 5th marked the Year of the Pig. Not the capitalist pig, mind you, more like the Animal Farm pig. Anyway, both China and Taiwan decided to use the Lunar New Year celebrations as an excuse to release propaganda videos. Now, with all these beautiful shots of Taiwan, you might think the Taiwan Tourism Bureau made this one. Nope, it was the Chinese People's Liberation Army. The juxtaposed images of PLA jets and bombers soaring through the sky is kind of the giveaway. It's kind of like taking a girl out for Valentine's Day saying, "Babe, I got you a little something. It's a gun for me to force you to marry me," which I'd like to do peacefully. So, Taiwan released this video with tanks firing and missiles launching, saying, "We are ready," which is like your Valentine's date saying, "Bring it." I never thought I'd say it, but by comparison, I have to give the Chinese PLA points for subtlety. Though, Taiwan's premier did win some subtlety points back in this video, where he criticized the Chinese Communist Party's handling of swine flu, while holding up Winnie the Pooh. Why Winnie the Pooh? It's a reference to Xi Jinping that Xi Jinping does not like. Good news, in a kind of horrible news sort of way. An Australian-led study is calling for the retraction of 400 scientific papers involving organ transplants because the organs may have come from people who didn't voluntarily give them up. We've known for a while now that the Chinese Communist Party kills both criminal prisoners and prisoners of conscience for their organs. But apparently, some in the medical community have been a bit slow on the uptake. Probably because they don't watch enough China Uncensored. Anyway, the study exposes a mass failure of English-language medical journals to comply with international ethical standards in place to ensure organ donors provide consent for transplantation. This is not the first time something like this has happened. In 2017, the prestigious medical journal Liver International retracted a scientific paper by Chinese surgeons. Over 4 years, the Chinese surgeons examined the outcomes of almost 600 liver transplants. Problem is, it's basically impossible for a single hospital to do that many liver transplants, especially at a time when China barely had any organ donors. So, where did they get all those organs from? Probably not volunteers. But hey, to save a few lives, you have to commit a few crimes against humanity, am I right? China's Skynet is really making progress. And no, I'm not talking about Skynet from Terminator. Chinese authorities actually named their mass surveillance program Skynet. And according to Radio Free Asia, by 2022, there will be almost 3 billion surveillance cameras in China. In other words, there will be about 2 cameras for every person in China. Smile. Chinese hackers have hacked a Norwegian software company. Visma is one of Europe's largest cloud-based managed service providers, with over 850,000 customers and net revenue of over $1 billion. The hackers released malware in Visma's internal system, but the company says none of their client servers were infected. The attacks were carried out by well-known state-backed hackers called APT-10. In December, the U.S. Justice Department charged 2 Chinese nationals believed to be a part of APT-10. They were charged with being part of hacks on 45 U.S. companies and many more in 11 other countries. Very prolific. A group of human rights groups are calling on the UN to look into the Chinese Communist Party's persecution of the Uyghur ethnic minority in Xinjiang. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the Geneva-based International Service for Human Rights, and the World Uyghur Congress have called on the UN's Human Rights Council to investigate the mass detention of Muslims in China.
Human rights activists say it's one of the dozens of political re-education camps where up to 1 million Muslims are said to have been detained in China's northwest Xinjiang province in recent years.
Now, appealing to the UN Human Rights Council is a good thing. The problem is China sits on the UN Human Rights Council for some reason. But if the Chinese Communist Party uses its position on the Human Rights Council to block this inquiry, well, these human rights groups can always go over their heads and appeal directly to the UN Security Council. And I'm sure they'll put the Chinese Communist Party in its place. I'm just kidding. China's on the UN Security Council too. I'm sad now. And finally, in a story that really stinks, Malaysian rainforests are being threatened by Chinese demand for durians. If you don't know what a durian is, I'm envious of your ignorance. Durian has been called the king of fruits. It smells like a mix of rotting garbage, an everything bagel, and my grandma's basement. And yet, soaring demand for durians in China is being blamed for a new wave of deforestation in Malaysia, with environmentalists warning vast amounts of jungle is being cleared to make way for massive plantations of the spiky, pungent fruit. And it's looking pretty bad. This is a durian plantation on the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. If you put your nose up to the screen, you can actually smell it. And look, there are lots of great reasons to destroy our planet, but durian is not one of them. Do it for money, or power, or to eliminate pandas, but don't do it for durians. That's this week's China News Headlines. Before we go, now is the time when I answer questions from you, my loyal 50-cent army, fans of the show who support the show through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Large, though, asks, does the PRC have universal health care? Good question. Despite all the promises of communism, or socialism with Chinese characteristics, it turns out taking care of the people isn't one of the Communist Party's top priorities. It's more interested in taking care of the people. According to the New York Times, the country does not have a functioning primary care system, the first line of defense for illness and injury. China has one general practitioner for every 6,666 people, compared with the international standard of one for every 1,500 to 2,000 people, according to the World Health Organization. Hospitals are understaffed, overworked, and doctors underpaid, plus constant vaccine scandals. It's gotten to the point where public hospitals rely on bribery to survive, and people are literally scalping tickets to see doctors. Now, in 2016, Xi Jinping launched Healthy China 2030. It's basically the first long-term plan to improve China's healthcare since the communists took over in 1949. On paper, China has some degree of cradle-to-grave healthcare coverage, but in practice, well, it's socialism with Chinese characteristics. Thanks for your question. Why am I answering questions on the show? It's because a lot of advertisers don't dare to work with a show that criticizes the Chinese Communist Party. So we rely on support from viewers like you on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Answering your questions on the show is one of my ways of saying thanks. So head over to patreon.com/China Uncensored to find out how you can keep China uncensored. Thanks for watching. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.